As you might gather, most Kashmiris find it very difficult to give a gold star to any Indian, irrespective of who you are. But Tarun got a gold star from the strangest, the most difficult, what we call Kharus people in Kashmir were saying, friend of Kashmir. And I find that quite an extraordinary achievement. This is a auditorium filled with people who knew Tarun very well. So one has to be sort of selective in how one chooses to remember him. The little clip that you saw from Brief Life of Insects, I think if you note that the opening sequence is shot almost exactly February 2015, it says. And when you people walked into the auditorium, there were some images showing from a later work of Tarun's, which is a photographic work called Niam Faith Hiniu Trep, which is unaddressed postcards from the Khasi Jayantiya Hills. In a sense, this is how many people have got to know Tarun as a kind of incredible repository of I would simply put, I would say wisdom about this absurd category called the Northeast, but that it's shorthand for what we know. But Tarun, it was more than a fascination or an obsession. I feel sometimes that in some senses, Tarun found his home in Shillong, and it's not simply because he married Angela Rangad and he has a family there and they're enmeshed. But in some senses, I think many of the questions that Tarun sought to ask, actually, he found the perches in Meghalaya, in the Northeast. And when I saw this clip earlier today at home, and I was thinking about this desire to kind of read through the ordinary, the songs of the harvest and the song of the cicada, and to try and understand really why we are here, and how much Tarun hated coming to Delhi, which on the third day he would usually announce to me that I can't deal with this city. So it was not some kind of nativism, but it was a kind of, I think he found a landscape in which he could pose the questions that he wanted to pose. And those were questions, some of which would baffle me, for example, to do with faith. Tarun was both an atheist and I suppose an agnostic, but with a very, very deep interest in the ways of the church in the Northeast. Unlike many of the people who've already spoken, I met Tarun not so long ago. In the lifespan of a tree, not so long ago, 20 years ago, when I was just beginning to work on a film in Kashmir. This was 2004, and I had sort of lost touch with Tarun. I didn't know him very well. I knew him as a student, and Keval Arora referred to this kind of brash young tousle-haired guy, and that's how I had met him when, according to his version of it, I sat on his jury at the Mass Communication Research Center at Jamia, and according to him, I rejected their proposal as being unfilmable, but I have no memory of this. And then there is a second memory that he retains, which is of when he was working at NDTV, working in a television environment. And I was part of a largely unemployed group of documentary filmmakers, and we would periodically meet to do screenings. And he came up to me afterwards and said, look, I work in NDTV and I want to get out. I want to make documentary films, and how do I do it? And as I said, it was a particularly bad phase for documentary film. Most of us were unemployed. And famously, his recollection is that I told him, do you have a job? And he said, yes. I said, do you get a salary? And he said, yes. I said, well, stick with it, This is not the version that I remember, and then there I was about to work on what I knew was going to be a difficult film, a political film. And although I'm Kashmiri, it was a very uncharted territory. And then I saw a film that he had cut, which was Vasudha Joshi's Girl Song in 2003. And it's a film about a blues singer in Calcutta, so very, very far away from the territory that I was going to get into. But there was something about the way he had dealt with images that I thought, this is a guy I want to work with. So I got in touch with him, and he was very anxious because he said, I've never done a long film before, but I'm willing to try. And we began work, and I have to say that in many ways, that experience of working on that film is probably the most important work experience of my life. I had been making films for a long time before that, but there was a kind of strange kind of freedom that we claimed for ourselves. When we were, trying something particularly difficult, Tarun and I would sort of egg each other on by saying, it doesn't matter if everybody hates it. If in Hindustani, joote padenge to kya hoga, it's all right, we'll deal with it. But we must make one film in our lives which we want to make the way we do. And it's strange, Tarun didn't go to Kashmir then. He didn't go after, and he's never been. But I don't know many people who understood the everyday texture of life in Kashmir the way he did. My home and work studio where he would come, we edited over several years, and he would come down for a few weeks each time, and we would work and cook and eat and work and cook. And I have a lot of material on Kashmir, half of which I haven't read myself, but you can be sure that Tarun had read all of it. So he knew all kinds of arcane details about people, individuals. And each time I came back from a shoot, we would watch the material, and he would just want me to talk while walking, like watching the material, not about what we were seeing, but anything, anecdotes, stories. And I think that way of working, that absorbing that material, it's a significant honor here today that Margaret Dickinson is here by some coincidence, who's an admirer. Tarun was a great admirer of her work as a film editor, and I'm so delighted that she's been able to be here. I'm not going to talk about the film, but after Tarun passed away, a whole lot of unexpected people from Kashmir messaged both publicly and privately, and they all used the same word. He was a friend of Kashmir. And I thought this was a strange thing for people he had never met. And how did they form that opinion? And some of it had to do with his work, as everybody knew, on Jashan-e-Azadi, but also as a presence on social media, but also Rayat. Sanjay Joshi mentioned Rayat, the webzine that Tarun so lovingly curated, actually became one of the most important repositories of writing on Kashmir at a time when Indian publications, both mainstream as well as non-mainstream, were extremely reluctant to carry material on Kashmir. So I think that this, it was a strange mix. It was, as you might gather, most Kashmiris find it very difficult to give a gold star to any Indian, irrespective of who you are. But Tarun got a gold star from the strangest, the most difficult, what we call Kharoos people in Kashmir were saying, friend of Kashmir, And I find that quite an extraordinary achievement. In 2010, there was an opportunity for me to go into the forests of Bastar with my friend and comrade Arundhati. And I met Tarun before going, and I told him about the film, and he was so excited. And I still remember him telling me, "This is the film I waited all my life to make." Not a film on Bastar or on the Maoists in Bastar, but a film on what we eventually called the life of revolutionary possibility, you know. And so, more formally, Tarun came on board not just as the editor of the film, but also a co-writer in that sense. And once again, I think that stronger by the experience of having worked on a long film together already, we got the opportunity to work on another film. And I think at the end of all these years, I think that not a day goes by. I mean, I'm not an overly sentimental person, but not a day goes by without my thinking of Tarun. And I think of him because every time I encounter a difficult idea or something which I'm not being able to tease through, my first reaction always was to send it to him. And he didn't have to reply, you know. It was just enough to signal to him that, what do you make of this, you know? And the fact that he didn't reply didn't matter, because 4 conversations down, we would have spoken about it. And so it's when I went to Shillong recently to meet with Angela and the children, just a brief conversation with Angela about all that remains unfinished in Tarun's computer. It makes me weep at the fact that this guy had spent the best part of the last 20 years accumulating so much material. You know, it began with this film that he wanted to do on the whole Christian revivalist movement, which he then abandoned, but then by then he had started taking photographs, and so eventually he emerged as a very accomplished photographer. So there are, on half a dozen different things, there are like hundreds and thousands of photographs and edits, and, you know, ideas for books and ideas for exhibitions. And it really is, I mean, there are all the reasons for missing Tarun, but also, you know, he was at that stage of his life when he was just poised to now blow through, you know, and every artist deserves that opportunity to, you know, to come through. And I feel both, I feel personally cheated, but I also feel guilty. I feel that, you know, we should have pushed him to do that book, to do that, you know, finish it, you know, and maybe there's a lesson for all of us somewhere. So that, you know, we grieve for his family and for his friends and comrades, but most of all, I grieve for the promise that has been snatched away from us, you know. I also know that Tarun was deeply, deeply saddened by the events around us, you know. I think the re-election of Modi for the second time, it broke his heart like it broke all of ours. And I'm not going to say that his arteries choked up because of that grief, but I know that it played a part, you know. It does require extraordinary courage or a certain kind of a way of screening off what we are going through. I mean, I know that we are having this meeting, and then there's a kind of normality which it is possible to fake in this city on a consistent basis, but we also know that everything is so shaky. And I just want to talk about one last thing, that, you know, Tarun, in January, he did probably his first sort of big exhibition of at the National Photo Festival in Ahmedabad. And interestingly, it was this work that he had done, which is called Aim, No, Nahi. Aim being the Khasi word for no and Nahi, which was a kind of photo essay of about 70 odd images about this figure of this 82-year-old Khasi lady in a very remote in Domiasat, where she single-handedly prevented the Uranium Corporation of India from, you know, putting in a mine there. And we had talked about the fact that it would make a great book, a slim photo book on the idea of resistance, just the act of saying no. And then he said, well, you know, I have a whole lot of pictures from our work with the trade unions in Meghalaya, especially with the Hawkers Union and so on. And so I said, oh, that would be a great second book, and then there can be a third. And no, so we had this fantasy of these series of small photo books, which could then be put into a sleeve, and it would be a kind of photographic repository of resistance. We're not going to give up. I think I have been in conversation with Angela, and hopefully by his birthday in December, we'll certainly bring together the first volume, and hopefully a second, and who knows, maybe a third. So we can't pretend that Tarun is not gone, and we can't pretend that his leaving is a colossal blow to us personally, but also to the comradeship and working lives and politics that we all shared. So yeah, I'll leave it there. Thank you.